Yes, you heard that right. World War II veteran Anne Puckridge, aged 99, has been left devastated after Sir Keir Starmer declined her heartfelt request for a meeting to discuss the plight of British pensioners living abroad. Despite her incredible journey from Canada to the UK to plead her case, Starmer's office cited pressures on his diary as the reason for the snub. And folks, what followed was a storm of outrage, because this isn't just about one meeting. It's about a policy that's been stripping over 453,000 British pensioners of their dignity for years.
How has this pension freeze affected your life? How is it continuing to affect your life?
It's in every aspect of life it takes. So you can't forget really for any day that you're on a frozen pension. It affects one's spending and planning. Entertainment is something one has to think very carefully about. Special festive occasions we have to think carefully about, and I've got grandchildren. I would like to do better by them. My daughter's helping me, and both my daughters are helping me enormously, but I'd prefer to live an independent life and live within my means. Certainly in my case, you had to keep going with delving into your savings,
right,
which meant that although we felt, well, maybe we should go back to Britain and make Britain look after us after all. But
well, and you say that because that's a good point, because I can see that you've got a couple of medals on your chest there. So what do they relate to?
Oh, they relate to service that I did during the war.
What was that? Are you okay to talk about that?
I actually was in India at the time. My father was in the army, and he was stationed in India. We couldn't get back we were due to go back to England for 6 years when the war broke out. Unfortunately, there was no room for personal trips like that, and we were trapped in India. Trips being used for the troop movements. And so I continued with my education in India and went to university for 2 years. Well, at the end of the 2 years of the university, I was 17. And they were just beginning to open up the sister services, as I call them, in India, as following on from the ones in Europe. And I was so keen to join and get started. It was exciting to a 17-year-old in those days. You know, one didn't fully appreciate the dangers and the tragedies that were going on. One realised they were there, but they hadn't hit one personally.
Anne Puckridge shares her heartbreak on GB News, calling the government's frozen pensions policy a bitter disappointment. Anne Puckridge's story is one of dedication and heartbreak. A proud veteran who served her country during its darkest hour, she has spent decades fighting for the dignity of pensioners like herself. Moving to Canada after retirement to be closer to her family, she never imagined that decision would trap her in a bureaucratic nightmare. For Anne and thousands of others, the issue boils down to an obscure policy that freezes the state pensions of British citizens who move to certain countries without reciprocal pension agreements. Unlike their peers living in the UK or in other nations where the policy doesn't apply, these pensioners don't see their payments adjusted annually for inflation. What might seem like a technicality has devastating real-world consequences. Anne's pension has been stuck at the same amount for years, its value eroding steadily as the cost of living rises. For someone of her generation, a generation that sacrificed so much for Britain, this feels like nothing short of a betrayal. "I never thought the country I fought for would turn its back on me like this," she said during her GB News appearance, her voice trembling. "It's not just about the money, it's about respect, dignity, and being treated as an equal citizen." Anne's trip to the UK was supposed to be a turning point. She hoped that meeting directly with political leaders like Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, would help her shine a light on the injustice faced by pensioners abroad. But that hope quickly turned into heartbreak when Starmer's office declined her request for a meeting, citing his busy schedule. Instead, Anne was redirected to Pensions Minister Emma Reynolds. Reports suggest that the meeting with Reynolds was cordial but unproductive, leaving Anne and others like her feeling that their concerns were being swept under the rug yet again. "It's always the same excuses," Anne said. "They tell us they understand, but they don't act. And now we're being told there's no political will to even discuss it." The fallout from Starmer's snub has been immediate and fierce. Social media exploded with reactions as the news broke. with number frozen pensions and number justice for Anne trending within hours. Messages of support for Anne poured in, along with sharp criticism of Starmer's leadership. One user tweeted, "Keir Starmer has time for photo ops and PR stunts, but can't spare a moment for a 99-year-old war hero." Disgusting. Meanwhile, Anne's story has become a rallying cry for pensioner advocacy groups who have long campaigned against the frozen pensions policy. The British Pensioners Abroad Alliance issued a scathing statement, accusing the government of shamefully abandoning those who spent their lives contributing to the country. "This is a policy rooted in outdated thinking," said the group's spokesperson. "It punishes people for where they live, even though they've paid into the system like everyone else." But the backlash hasn't been limited to social media and advocacy groups. Starmer's political opponents have seized the moment to attack his character and priorities. Conservative Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp delivered a blistering critique on GB News, calling Starmer's actions disgraceful. "This is a man who claims to champion fairness and justice," Philp said. "Yet when a 99-year-old veteran, someone who served this country in its time of need, asks for a simple meeting, he can't be bothered. It tells you everything you need to know about his priorities." The timing couldn't be worse for Starmer, who was preparing to deliver his much-hyped Plan for Change speech, a relaunch of his government after a challenging first 5 months in office. Starmer's approval ratings have been slipping steadily, with a recent Ipsos poll showing 53% of voters are disappointed with his performance. The frozen pensions scandal has only added fuel to the fire, overshadowing what should have been a moment for him to reset his agenda. During his speech, Starmer attempted to regain control of the narrative, outlining ambitious goals for policing, healthcare, and economic growth. But critics were quick to point out the disconnect between his lofty promises and the reality faced by people like Anne. GB News commentator Bev Turner didn't hold back in her assessment. "This isn't a plan for change, it's a plan to save face. What's missing from all these grand speeches is empathy for the people who are suffering now." Anne's story has also reignited a broader debate about how the UK treats its elderly citizens. For many, her plight is emblematic of a system that too often neglects those who are no longer seen as economically useful. "We're not asking for charity," Anne said. "We're asking for what's fair, what we were promised when we paid into the system all our lives." Despite the overwhelming public support for her cause, Anne remains sceptical that real change will come. She knows all too well how easy it is for politicians to make sympathetic noises while doing nothing to address the root of the problem. But if nothing else, her trip has brought the issue back into the spotlight, forcing those in power to confront the human cost of their inaction. For Starmer, the question is whether he can weather this storm and prove to the public that he's more than just talk. For Anne, the question is simpler. When will someone listen? When will someone act? The frozen pension scandal isn't just a political issue, it's a moral one. And with public pressure mounting, the government may find that ignoring it is no longer an option. If you want more updates on this explosive story and all the latest twists in UK politics, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and stay tuned. Because this pension scandal is far from over, and we're bringing you every scandalous moment as it happens.